Docs, when you think of neurology, do you find it sexy? Well, I sure as heck do because of this incredible doc with me. When I find that I am able to communicate at a higher level and connect with my patient, and it's fresh and it's invigorating every time. A large part of that is because of what we are going to learn today from this incredible doctor. I'm honored to have on the Chiropractor's Edge, Dr. Mac. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jake. It's lovely to be here.
It is so great to see you. You know, I love who you stand for. I love who you are. I was listening to one of your podcasts a couple of weeks ago, and you said something very, very beautiful. You said that we need to ensure that we give vulnerability a voice. And that really resonated with me because a lot of times we think, you know, as chiropractors, you know, we define ourselves by our technique. We define ourselves by so many other things. And when we have struggles or when we find that we actually don't know it all, it's hard to share that vulnerability. Why is it important for chiropractors to specifically understand what that really means? And how can it transform who they are as a chiropractor?
I think there's we carry such responsibility in those one-on-one interactions with patients and in the role that we play. And I think what we oftentimes don't talk about is we don't talk about that sense of isolation and what happens in terms of how we are experiencing being the doctor, how we're experiencing, you know, that vulnerability that is exposed when you're dealing with people at that level. And so, you know, what I would say to you is this, is I would say, when we don't share that, which has oftentimes been the case in this profession, there's sort of like a model of practice. There's an accepted sort of way with which we've been taught, that, you know, students continue to be taught. And the reality is that that's not actually what practice looks like out there for a lot of people. And so we, you know, if we sort of are, you know, we compare ourselves to that practice model, and sometimes that's really unfair. And so, you know, I'll give you an example. I was speaking with a group out of the UK on Monday, a few days ago, and that group was a group of women, and they knew that I was connected to students. They knew I was connected to young doctors, and we were having exactly this conversation about vulnerability. And they said, like, what can I do to support the next generation of chiropractors? And I said, open your doors no matter what your practice is like. And in the chat immediately, Somebody said, I never thought about that because I thought my practice wasn't good enough to have a student shadow.
Wow.
2 days a week, small practice, not high volume, not the model
Of what
that
some
we're
people
taught is supposed to be the success model. And the reality is, you know, when we explored that in conversation, is she's incredibly fulfilled. And so then students don't get to actually see, doctors don't get to see the fact that there are other practices out there doing some really cool things that aren't classically the practices that we all grew up aspiring to own, to run, you know. And so that's what I talk about with vulnerability. It's, you know, and you know, we talked about your group. You know, you have docs who set up their practices, you know, at a time in their life where it suited them. And they find themselves in a situation where that pace isn't their natural rhythm anymore, or that model of practice, because life has taught them something different, they want something different, and they feel stuck in their own practice that they created. And so when I talk about vulnerability, it's like, that's the evolution of being a doctor. That's what we all experience, except we're not having that conversation enough. And I think we're losing people because they think that dissatisfaction in that moment in time, or that practice that they don't have, means that they shouldn't be a chiropractor.
That is absolutely the truth. That is so powerful. You know, I remembered personally 10 years ago, I had a traumatic brain injury, and I kept calling myself the crippled chiropractor.
Yeah.
And it was not who I am. That's not who I speak. And to see how my mind changed, even though we were having success, it transformed and morphed something that I didn't recognize anymore. And I'm like, this is not what I want. This doesn't bring me joy. But I was able to recognize that because I had great people in place. So, my wife included, several of my mentors were able to help me. What do you say to the doc who has those golden handcuffs in their mind or physically in their practice, that they're not doing what lights them up? They're not, because you're not, you could share practice secrets, which I'm sure we'll talk about on, well, hey, here's a practice secret when you're communicating with the patient. Here's a marketing secret. But the greats like you always go back to the fundamentals. And the fundamentals, if you cannot be honest with yourself, if you cannot be vulnerable with who you really are or who you know you should be, a lot of times we make choices that don't necessarily define us. But what do you say to the doc who is trapped in that, where I'm waking up every day not happy, I'm getting through the day, and most docs are fairly busy, but they're not lit up. What do you say? What do they need to do?
The simplest answer and some of the most difficult work is to gain clarity on what's working and what's not for you. And it means you have to go inside, So I was speaking to a student last week, and, students always have this angst associated with which technique should I practice?
Always.
Right? It's like they think they're supposed to know. And so I have this conversation with, even at the student level, like gaining clarity. And that's, what do you actually like, what's actually in your soul, without thinking about what any other chiropractor would tell you that is their model. Look inside and go, things like, what's your relationship with time? What's your natural rhythm?
Wow.
What feels the easiest for you to execute without that it's effortless? Because that's a factor in choosing technique.
Wow.
Or what about, what about your relationship with force? Right? And so, to the women, and, if anybody reads anything, they know that I, heavily lean into supporting women. And the reality is, young girls don't wrestle. We don't learn to be, force is not playful. Force is aggressive. So for many, many young women, using force, even though it is the power of good through the adjustment, is really an obstacle for many. And so it's, the idea that more force is what they need, when in fact for some, that doesn't feel like that's ever going to feel healing, because it's not who they are. We have amazing low force techniques that are incredibly effective. So not everything's for everybody. And so what I say is clarity is needed. So for those docs that are stuck in that practice model, we all grew up in that model of practice where it was all about new patient acquisition, convert them and retain them. And then you've got this whole younger group, and we've got social media. We have different ways to access patients that are not part of that conventional model. We have natural rhythms that are differently, that are different. And the reality is that just because you haven't seen your model yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Wow.
Right? And so the business has to make sense, and it has to, the numbers have to work. But the reality is, if you don't have clarity about what's working in your practice and what you love and what is sustainable and what's no longer sustainable, without judgment, like without judging yourself, just identifying the factors that are playing out in your day-to-day, in your business that you set up, are no longer serving you. You can't change them if you've actually not done that work. And it's uncomfortable.
Right.
Right? It's uncomfortable.
And it's when I hear you speak, you are making history for women, not just obviously in our profession, and to see how that is accomplished, that's exactly how it's done. You have to be crystal clear. And a lot of docs are trying to cram the wrong key in the wrong lock. And jam hard enough, you might be able to twist it, but there are going to be techniques and practice methods and communication methods that once it's in, it feels like jazz. It just is smooth. You feel connected, and you see the difference in yourself and in your patients. You and I are privileged to know many developers of techniques who have founded the techniques, and they all say the same thing. Do not be married to your technique. The developers of the technique say that. Why? Because of what you just said. That is powerful.
And people change techniques during their career, except we're not talking about it. So
Yes.
everybody's feeling stuck. It's like, but everybody knows me to be a Gonstead person, or everybody knows me to be Nuka. And really, I'm feeling like my evolution as the practitioner is now working more in a tonal realm. Or I've had trauma in my life, or I've had a concussion, and I really feel drawn to help people like me because I actually have healed from that concussion in a manner with which I was told was not possible. Like
Mm.
those are the reasons we changed our practices, except I don't see that conversation a lot in our profession.
And it's shocking because we root for the people who have failed and were vulnerable about their failure or the lessons that they learned. We were talking to Joe Polish the other day, and he's like, my life, I had a horrible life. I did everything wrong. I did the worst of the worst of the worst. He goes, and I finally realized I am a thoroughbred. Why would I put into me or put out of me what is not worthy of a thoroughbred? And to see you act that way is so critical. And why can't we celebrate when we change? I had to change everything when I had my personal injury.
Right.
And I had to, and people are like, why do you adjust like, what do you twist your hand like that? Why do you what technique is that? I'm like, this is the Jake Hansen technique,
Yeah.
because I had to learn my thing. But why is it that we can't be open with that when it is celebrated?
Right. Yeah, and it's, the other part of that conversation that I feel super motivated in having and talking about this, experience that many chiropractors are having is, you and I both know. I mean, it's been decades we've been talking about the market share chiropractic has.
Yes.
It's not changed a lot.
Nope.
And it's something that is scary to students because they know that. And, we still don't necessarily know. I mean, I know somebody who does an amazing job with a lot of business coaching with chiropractors who basically said, the other thing that we all always wonder is that once people understand chiropractic, then they stay under care. But that doesn't mean that they don't stay, that they stay under the care of the same chiropractor. So even in that 10%, how much of it is actually expanding our market share? Right. And I truly believe the only way we're going to expand the market share is when there is a variety of practices that are out there, when we break out of that mold that our practices need to be in the best neighborhoods with these demographics, when we're, these younger docs that are putting their table on their back and heading to homes and seeing families in parks. There's a doc in South Carolina that is doing it rurally in parks. There's a doc that I taught who is the chiropractor for professional motocross during many weekends and is a pediatric chiropractor during the week.
Wow.
Because that's who he is.
That's awesome.
Right? And so it's that expression. There's this beautiful chiropractor in Montana who is a mom of 4 who wants to continue being a chiropractor and thought, what, all of these other families that I know that have a lot of children don't make it into the office, not because they don't want chiropractic care, but the actual mechanics of getting all the kids around their schedule into a car. So she decided, I'm just going to do home visits. And now what it's become is neighborhood visits, where they all basically create this. She's coming over and she pops up one table and the families all come and it's a social event in the neighborhood when she does.
Amazing.
Right? So that's what excites me. We need to be creative enough to recognize that we have not shifted the market share. And I really believe this next generation has the potential of doing it if we support them in that shift.
Yeah. So, for those listening, by the way, if you already don't follow Dr. Mac, if you go to artofdoctoring.com, that's exactly where you can find out who she is and how you can coach and learn from her. This is what she does. She helps you define who you are. She helps you define your what. She helps you define your who. She gives you crystal clear clarity. And she's talking from a source of abundance. She's been there. She's done that. And she's helped some of the most affluential people do this. So artofdoctoring.com is where you can find her. And you guys are all over the map. I mean, you're going to be spending Costa Rica, or you're going to be spending the summer in Costa Rica, Dr. Mo. Yeah. And you guys have your first retreat there. And this is one of the things I love when and it's a scarcity mindset type of mentality where people say, well, how many chiropractors in this town? Oh, wait, stop, time out. Get rid of that vernacular.
Yeah.
Hey, well, there's retreats all over the place. You guys have created something that is so unique, that is so beautiful and transformational within the Prana Foundation. Would you mind sharing a little bit about how you created that and the major need that it fulfills? Because from an outside perspective, to the scarcity mindset, people say, well, there's 100 seminars, but to see how unique and how when you guys say you're full, and how fast it goes. I would love for you to share how that came to be and how tremendously niched and micro-targeted it is.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the principles, our foundation is really based on education, service, and community. Those were our three main pillars. And so when we look at our values, one of our core values is to ease the path. And both Monique and I feel very committed to making things easy as we possibly can. Do the uncomfortable work.
Yep.
Do it in an environment where you feel safe to express who you are, to express your vulnerability, where you come from, where you are, and where you want to go. Dream big. And so the reality was, you can't do that in, a Zoom call. You can't do that in, you can do pieces. But what would it look like if we actually created a safe container to explore these conversations? Because one of our foundational principles, and it certainly I've lived by it, who I am as a person precedes who I am as a chiropractor. And part of what I think a lot of times with overwhelm, one of those pieces of overwhelm is when we show up in our offices and patients take, because that's the nature of the relationship. But the goal should always be that they can come and take what they need without taking from you. And so the reality is, we are personally powerful when people can do that, when they can come and take what they need. So really our retreats were really built around those two main principles, which is let's create some safety to explore. Who are you as a person? Let's give you some tools in your toolbox, because practice can be exhausting. Practice can take, and life can take as well. So how do we stay grounded in who we are at all times, whether we are functioning as the doctor or in our personal life, because we are the same person, where our patients can take what they need and we know how to fill our own cup. And so that's really what our retreats are about, is we create this beautiful space in a beautiful environment, and we set up a program where we just basically just slowly roll through the week with lots of spare time, but really encouraging solo time and solo exploration and connectedness, where everybody just starts to actually express where their struggles are, and the community shows up to help support them. And
Wow.
it's always like the most amazing week of exploration, and you get to know these other amazing people in our profession who are doing amazing work and struggling and thinking they're by themselves. And that's what our retreats are really about. It's about that exploration and trying to make things easier.
I love make the path easier. I love that. I'd like to touch on that for a second, where it's interesting how we see a lot of docs that say someday. Hey, someday I'm going to do that retreat for myself.
Yeah.
Hey, someday is not on anybody's calendar, right? It's not on anybody's calendar. Doctors, you can have everything you want. You can have the end from the beginning if you reverse engineer it, right? You shared something that there's a group of students who said, hey, we see the value in this. We're not going to wait 25 years to do this so that we can then be who we want to be. We're doing this now. Like, what mindset? Why is it, do you think, that we get crippled with that someday mentality when it comes to doing something so transformational like this, something for ourselves that we're starving for and dying for and suffering from? Why do we wait?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a withholding, right? I mean, it's a self-sabotage kind of situation, I think, sometimes. I think the other thing is that we sort of look at it. I've learned a lot about, even just asking, like when somebody shows up, what motivated you to come? And there's an idea that you show up when you're really broken, or you show up when, or it's like supreme luxury, as opposed to it's actually how we learn to take care of ourselves, And Jeannie Kakazaki one time was up on stage, and I love Jeannie, and Jeannie was talking about self-care, and she was talking about self-care as a diversion. And our culture associated with self-care is only true self-care when you are looking inside. Our culture has now done replacement, where self-care is a diversion. And so I think it's easy for us to have the illusion that we're taking care of ourselves by actually just focusing on something else, as opposed to doing the hard work and going inside. And so I'd like to say that it's, yes, maybe it's, there's the self-sabotage or withholding, or when I get to, Anthony Robbins on one hand has taught us a lot of really great stuff, but the goal setting piece falls short a little bit, because when if you don't know and understand that, you goal set and then what? Right? You reach that goal and then what? I mean, there's a natural drop off, right? And so there's this idea that I will do this when, but you've never actually really looked at the larger picture trajectory of recognizing that this is your journey now.
Right.
This is your journey now,
And
yeah.
I love that, because that's a truth that we see, that self-sabotage. And when you have the right people around you, or in your daily habits, when you're really questioning, am I where I want to be? And being honest with where you are, that happens. We also see a lot of docs who they're struggling. Well, I can't take the time off for that. Right. Well, I remember the first few times we did, one of the first times we met you and Mo was at the Berkshires with Scott Garber and Liam Schubel and Shauna Lacey and just all the wonderful people. And we took time off, and we literally closed the practice down for like a week and a half, because we knew that we needed that. I knew that I wanted, and we were doing phenomenal, but I needed that for myself. And we came back even more on fire. But that self-doubt crept in. Yeah. Your practice is going to suffer. You're not making money, da-da-da-da-da. But that's the mistake we see a lot of docs make. So again, you guys, you got to follow Dr. Mac and what she teaches, because she will teach you the strategies on how to build a practice, on how to bring associates and the right team members in, so that when you take those times off, it's easier to do. And then you can allow your team to do that sooner. You got associates to do that sooner, so that they too can be their best. This is what we teach here at the Chiropractor's Edge, and Dr. Mac is an expert at doing this. So with all the amazing things going on right now, we've never seen a world waking up. We always joke, we don't know what was washed more, brains or hands during COVID, right? Yeah. But we're seeing a lot of people really come back and say, oh my gosh, like every day someone new comes in, doc, so I heard that you say these things, you live these things, you believe these things, and I'm there too. Here's what I've seen. We have never lived in a better time to be a chiropractor. In your opinion, to the doc who is looking at, they're strong with who they are with themselves. It's a constant battle it's a constant sharpening of the axe, right? What are some of the best things that, as a doc understands what they really want, they're crystal clear on their vision. What are the things that you teach, and how do they attract, how do they find their ideal client with them? Because again, a lot of docs will say, oh, here's what I want. Yet they'll do something completely polar opposite of what they want. How do we attain what we want? How do we find people within the, and obviously it's a very broad question, but how do you suggest that docs find people like them, their ideal client, based on who they are?
The way I typically address that is I talk about different categories of patients. And, we have classically sort of that there's the marketing ideas of niche and avatar, and those people that tend to struggle the most tend to get squeamish when you even say those two words, because it then automatically relegates them to sales, and feels wrong in healthcare. So I basically go, okay, so we're going to take off niche, we're going to take off avatar, we're not talking about sales, because the reality is, when we want to serve and when we have something to offer, what's most important is that you are very crystal clear on what that offering actually is, right? And so I talk about categories of patients, because I think this will be one, another example of when we talk about the way I was taught to market. I graduated, and I was, 20 years ago, you left school and it was anybody with a spine is my potential patient.
Right.
Right? And you just learned to communicate incredibly well what chiropractic is. Anybody with a spine is going to want it. Right. But there wasn't the internet, and there wasn't, and so this was the time where there was still dinner with the docs, and this is how you market, and here's your internal marketing and your external marketing. This is what it looks like. But the reality is the landscape is different now. And so what we have is we have people who are incredibly well educated on Google, right? And so we have people who are in a stage of healing where they are with discomfort or symptoms, doing their own work, do it yourself, not ready to step into a one-on-one. And, that individual, you need to be positioned so that they know that you're there when they're ready. So, we talk about funneling patients, which was never a concept that was ever talked about when I graduated. That the idea that I needed to have actually, like, not just for today who was going to come in as my new patients, but where are the patients 3 months from now going to come from?
Powerful.
We were creating. So it's, there's a real aversion to Instagram, for example, but it's how it's why you're hammering away the same kind of messaging, because the reality is when people are ready, you've positioned yourself in the community as the person that they're going to take, to take action with. And so I think that now when we're marketing patient base, it's very distinctly different than what it used to be, because we basically have people who are not ready to step into care, who are interested in a do-it-yourself program but aren't interested. So they know they need to take action, but they're not ready for the one-on-one piece. The one-on-one piece, those people we've always created, we're in our community. They're coming in off referrals. Those are the easiest grassroots build, they're already there, right? But it's all of these other categories of people who are wanting to take action but not one-on-one, who are looking for an expert in their community, who are on Google looking for what that actually looks like. Those are the people we have to start to attract. And, if the pandemic taught us anything, the fear associated, in chiropractors who were brick and mortar alone that didn't have an aspect of education that was potentially revenue, a revenue stream, were the people on Facebook looking for side hustles. What do you sell? And I'm like, you are the most educated in what we do as chiropractors, from a health perspective, from a health philosophy perspective, from a nervous system perspective. Mm-hmm. Get out there and start to educate. And so for some of my younger docs, very quickly, we talked about what would that look like when you meet all of your patients without a mask. So during mask time, we got them as quickly as possible screening new patient visits this way. Why? Because patients were in the safety of their home, without a mask. You got to see them and interact. You got to do a case history without this block, without them being afraid of your office. They trust, and then they showed up. And so it's about those kind of pivots, in my opinion, that we have to actually start to explore as chiropractors. It's about offering some group programming, which is so critical. And group programming doesn't mean that you're outside your scope. You should be the person educating people about health.
Yes.
Because we're living it. It's the way we live our lives. So there's an idea that the online offering should be something, certification or something. No, these are your patients, and they want to live and know and understand where does health come from? Teach that.
Yes.
Teach that. And make that available to people in your community who maybe are apprehensive about you as a chiropractor, but know healthy people come to see you.
I love that. You're an expert in doing a little thing that I love. I mean, you make these little 1-minute videos that I've seen, I don't know, like probably 20 of just, and topics geared towards chiropractors, towards health in general. And there's so much power in a 1-minute video. I've seen videos of you doing less, where the message is clear. And again, getting out there, that's going to feed you tomorrow, in a week from now, a month from now. Someone finally reads it, someone finally sees it again. That's critical. You are the modern Netflix in the chiropractic world, where Blockbuster died because they refused to change.
Right.
They said, I remember about a month before Blockbuster went under, my wife and I, when I went to the store, and there's a DVD, and it was like $13 to rent. I was like, to rent? Like, I don't want to buy it. $13 to rent. And he goes, we're a monopoly, man. No one else can beat us. And they were done after that point. They refused to change. Yeah. And we live in such an incredible digital age where we can touch people in such a different way. We can communicate and reach out, and they can too. Right. And it's taking people where they want to be taken from. And so docs, when you're doing your branding, clone who you are, clone your message, clone your feel of who you are, be congruent When you say you believe something, yet you do something different, you be congruent with who you are. People want truth. People want vulnerability. They don't believe in you're an absolute perfect doctor with no vices, with whatever. Be who you are, and that's why again you need to work with Dr. Mac. So go to artofdoctoring.com for those that are wanting to get involved with the Prana Foundation, not only supporting it but as a participant. How is the best way we do that?
There's a couple different ways. If you're sort of looking at what all of our offerings are, what we do, who we are, you can go to our website, pranafound.org. We also have a private Facebook group, which most of our offerings we offer there first. We tend to, make things available to individuals in our private community first. And so for right now, the platform is still Facebook because it's still running the best groups as far as privacy. So you can join our Prana Foundation, the Prana Foundation private Facebook page, and you'll always see what we're up to. And then, I'm both myself and Dr. Mo are super open to talking to people who are just not even sure what they need, but know that they need help. And so if you go to my website, drtamaramacintyre.com, there is a link that's right there that's complimentary call. Let's just discover where you're at, what you need, and the ways with which, whether it's our services or somebody else within the community that we can refer you to make sure that you get the help and support that you want. That's how you do it.
Dr. Mac, thank you so much for teaching us vulnerability needs to have a voice, and how to voice that, how to be true to who we are, and be able to, and how to think critically and be crystal clear with what we want, and how to practice in conjunction with who we really are and who we want to be, and how to attract people who are suffering just like we do, who think just like we do, but that we have the answers and the education to take them there. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. We appreciate your love and wisdom at Lyceum. I mean, you guys are everywhere. You're going to Germany soon. I mean, you guys are all over the map.
Yeah, we'll be in Europe in September, I think. Yeah.
If you get a chance, you guys, to listen to Dr. Mac, your life will be transformed. I personally, and I'm getting emotional here, I've had a traumatic brain injury that changed me to my core, changed how I think, how I feel, how I interpret my world, and how I act towards my world, and it changed me. And to do some of my vagus nerve and polyvagal, and to learn how to calm down, to think, to heal. You know how many times I put my finger in my ear, Dr. Mac? And for those that know,
yeah.
My breathing techniques. She teaches you, she really heals the healer so that you can be the best doctor possible to change people's lives, because that's what you were born to do. So thank you for joining us today. I can't wait to have you on again, and we'll see you in a few, Doc. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.